I'm going to reveal in this video the best SaaS content marketing strategy which you should be running in 2025 and beyond. And ironically, only a fraction of SaaS companies are actually running this playbook today. But if they knew the results our clients are getting where they're actually 2xing to 3xing their organic visibility, they'd probably take it much more seriously. So at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a very clear understanding of what is the old way of doing things, what is the new way of doing things, and how you should go about doing the new way by each element which you need to think about when it comes to content marketing. So let's dive into all these parts individually, one by one, and we're going to tackle it one part at a time. So first, let's talk about the old setup in terms of how companies are still running content marketing today and why it's outdated and what you should actually do about it instead. Let's just take to start with the customer journey. So you can also call this a marketing funnel. A lot of companies run this for like a top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. There's multiple ways you can structure this. I personally prefer this way because it allows you to have a more granular understanding basically of your funnel. So let's just take an example to understand exactly how this works and how after old companies are running this old playbook basically. So if you're a SaaS company, let's say you're in cold email, unaware would be someone who doesn't actually know that cold email in the first place can actually help them solve the problem they're trying to solve. Okay, so that would be how can you get more clients? Okay, so someone could find a piece of content around how to get more clients, they'd move through to the next stage. They become problem aware. They'd actually discover that cold email is one of the ways to actually get customers. Okay, so that could be an article, for example, on how to do cold email, for example. Then after they move into solution aware, they discover that to do actually cold emailing, they need to have actually cold email software. They become solution aware. The next part, they become product aware. So for example, they discover some piece of content which tells them that, hey, actually there's multiple solutions on the market. You could do Lemlist, you could do Instantly, Woodpecker, etc. They become product aware. Then after you have most aware, this is where they actually become aware of your actual brand and who you are basically in terms of like cold email solutions, like a Lemlist, Instantly, etc. This is basically the customer journey in terms of like how it's structured. Now, most companies are running this not well in terms of they're just throwing keywords against the wall and trying to see exactly what sticks. Their keyword strategy, or at least their content strategy in terms of which topics, which ideas are we actually generating content around is very simply scattered. It's not always tied back to the ICP. It's simply driven through SEO tools and volume in terms of like, okay, we know this keyword has some type of volume. Let's go after it. There's no real understanding in terms of like, how is this actually going to map out our customer journey for our ICP, given all these stages. So that's the first thing we should get wrong, is not having a proper strategy in terms of the actual keywords being picked. That's the first thing. The next part is there's no real distribution in terms of understanding, okay, what are the content assets, not just like the actual ideas, but like what are the best pieces of content which actually suit well for targeting this type of keyword in this stage of the funnel. So for example, all this type of content down here, that's going to be more sales enablement. All the stuff up here though, higher up in the funnel, is going to make more sense depending on the channel, and you're going to want to cherry pick basically the channel to match that up with the topic. So that's the next part, is on the actual picking of the content. The next thing also which SaaS companies are doing wrong is in terms of how they're generating content, it's a lot more focused on the platform instead of actually focusing on the users. Okay, so the idea being is a lot of generic content being produced just for the simple reason of actually trying to get it to rank, for example, on Google, etc. And the next part here where also actually companies are getting it wrong is actually how they're producing content. In terms of a lot of the companies are producing very generic content, which is more just focused for the actual platform compared to actually focusing on the user. And the last part which we'll focus on is more around the SEO part, but like SEO and how content is actually being found online today is changing dramatically. And there's a real big shift basically there to be had. So that is why companies today, their old content marketing strategy, it's scattered. They don't have a very good understanding of the customer journey. They don't have a very good understanding of the content types, which are better suited for each stage of the journey. On the ideation, they're not too sure if that actually resonates the best with their ICP in terms of bringing back the best types of users. They have no real strategy here in terms of like distribution and repurposing that content. And overall, they're creating a lot of generic fluff, which today, in today's age of content, really just doesn't cut it anymore. So this is where most companies, I see them actually unfortunately slipping up, and they're not getting the best results possibly because they don't have the correct approach. So before we dive into the how to run a new content marketing strategy today in 2025, which really is going to cover all ends of your marketing strategy, let's talk about very briefly what it is, and then after we'll dive into the how to. So the new strategy today to be running is having a very tight grip of the customer journey and understanding which topics and which ideas should we actually be posting content around which actually fit our ICP? And that starts straight away with a very tight understanding of your ICP and the pain points basically, which they are looking to solve before they come to you. And it's also going to come to an extra idea, which we're going to talk about. It's called the high LTV, low churn rate user segments. It's very simply that certain profiles of customers come to you for a very specific reason because you solve a specific problem in the market very well. And you want to double down basically on that because that is the reason why today users are coming to you, they're buying from you, and they continue to buy from you. So there's going to be this idea here of having a very good understanding of, okay, which topics are we actually doubling down upon? The next idea is going to be, given the customer journey and how attention is actually fragmented actually across different channels, which channels are we actually focusing on? And are we going to go and get the attention where it actually is, depending on what that keyword or topic is? Because different channels serve different purposes and not all topics are actually being searched for, or at least the demand is not actually there for certain topics on certain channels. We have to be very precise in terms of where we're putting our content creation efforts. The next idea is going to be on creating content for users and really going above and beyond in terms of creating value and steering away from creating generic fluff, which is just created for the algo. So really trying to double down basically on what users are doing and going above and beyond. And the last idea is going to be on the distribution of content in terms of like how we're actually creating once and distributing forever and getting more leverage into the system we actually put in. And this is how you're going to be able to compete with bigger teams, which have more marketing budgets and have more resources to create more content. If you're strategic in terms of creating one piece of content and after distributing that into different formats, this is how you're going to create leverage, and this is how you're going to level up basically your content strategy. And we're also going to dive into more detail on the SEO part, which is changing radically, which obviously has a huge influence in terms of content marketing because a lot of our channels obviously is focused on that part of the channel, that search engine. So we're going to talk about that basically in a lot of depth. So let's dive in now to the actual how-to. Now that we have a great understanding of like, this is the customer journey and these are our problems which we need to solve. So let's dive into the new strategy in 225 and how to go about it. So let's dive in now into the how-to part of running this content strategy. And before we dive into the ins and outs of all these strategies, I just want to talk about one first idea, is that if you're a company and you're newly established, you definitely want to focus on the bottom of the funnel, okay? So this is the part where buyers are in the market and they're already ready to buy because your resources are going to be constrained. You don't have the possibility to go up the funnel and open up a much larger pool of buyers because your resources simply aren't the same degree of these bigger companies which can spend the time, can spend the budget to go and influence more of the market to then after have basically that customer. That means your focus should be on the bottom of the funnel. That doesn't mean though that the top of the funnel here isn't of interest, or quite on the contrary, the top of the funnel in hindsight is where the most of the money is to be made, but you need much bigger resources to go after it. And an extra part why the top of the funnel is so interesting is that customers that know about you during the top of the funnel, they're going to be educated in a way that when they come to you later on, they actually will come directly to you. They'll be some of your best customers, your best advocates, and it'll be a much different conversation in terms of them coming to you. But still, I just want to say like, it depends on your growth stage in terms of where you're at. So if you're short on budget, you want to focus on the bottom of the funnel. And as you have more capacity, more resources, whether that be budget-wise, or whether that be effort-wise, and in terms of like people and like running different campaigns and running different channels, you don't want to start moving up the funnel basically. So that's just one idea here which I just want to talk about before we dive into the rest. And we're going to talk about the idea of high LTV, low churn rate user segments. Okay, so this very simply means that every company has a specific pattern of users and feature sets which people come to them for and stay on and keep buying. And so the idea being is that some of these, as we said, features and use cases why people come to you are going to have basically a high LTV and a low churn rate basically of these specific users. Okay, so low churn rates. Okay, the idea being here is that we want to go after users which present for us the biggest potential in terms of revenue because there are specific patterns in terms of who these customers are and what they can bring for us. Okay, so that very simply said, there's different ways of doing it. You can either go about it in terms of like, what is a specific reason customers use our specific SaaS solution for? That's like the actual use case in terms of how they use your SaaS. But it could also be, for example, the industry in terms of like who they are as a type of customer in terms of which vertical they are in, for example. So if you're a proposal software, maybe for some reason, you know, a photography company, which is a local business who do photography, maybe they're a smaller potential for you in terms of like who they are are as a customer in terms of why they'll use your software and the subscription they'll get out of it. On the flip side though, if you were to try and target agencies who had sales teams, or for example, SaaS companies who had sales teams, there's going to be much more seats and usage basically of your software. And that basically means that there's going to be more interest in terms of trying to target those specific types of personas because they're going to bring more revenue. It's as simple as that in terms of like trying to identify exactly what are our best customers. And this is going to then influence very heavily how you're going to conduct your content strategy, because you're going to double down basically on the customer avatar, which really makes the most impact for you in terms of revenue. And that way, you know that you're going to pull out the most basically out of your content strategy. So this means it's both going to be in terms of like who you're trying to focus on, and also in terms of like which topics exactly, because that way, if you're understanding of like, we solve these specific problems very well, customers, if they discover you through trying to solve those problems, they're going to come to you more. Okay, so an example of that would be, for example, let's take a cold email company, let's take Lemlist. Instantly have a position in the market where they were well known for having multiple sending accounts, because everyone knew that deliverability, you need to have basically more sending accounts with a lower volume to basically land inside the inbox. That's what Instantly got well known for. They took a lot of traction on that. Another company such as Lemlist, they're very well known for like all parts around multi-channel. So if Lemlist, for example, want to run a content strategy, they would more want to lean into the whole multi-channel and having a multi-channel outbound sequence with LinkedIn, etc., voice notes and email all combined, because that is a solution which they are well known for in terms of solving the multi-channel side. So that is the reason people come to Lemlist in the first place, which means if they want to direct their content strategy, they want to partially direct it around this idea of multi-channel basically. So this is how, first of all, you identify which verticals and which topics make the most sense for us as a company to actually double down on basically. So that's this first idea here in terms of high LTV, low churn rate user segments. So the next part we want to talk about is just how content strategies have evolved compared to a few years back, and especially in the recent years. So we're going to talk about Google here, because a lot of the attention is actually on Google in terms of they have the majority of the market in terms of people searching actively on their search engine. So think about Google in terms of like, what do we have before and what do we have today? So before on Google, you had the famous, 10 links, right? We had the PPC right at the top. This is like the results here, which were paid. So we've got these at the top of the SERP. And then after we have the organic results, right? We have the 10 blue links. Okay. So we've got organic after down here. So we've got these ones, right? And we've got 10 of them. So this is like your typical SEO which used to happen back in the days. And this is highly evolved right now. What we have here today is very simple to get an ROI out of SEO. It was very clear in terms of getting an ROI out of SEO. It was very simple because there was so much attention you actually got on the organic side, not just by trying to optimize for other parts, right? You could definitely get a lot of visibility just by optimizing for the organic part. So this is how SEO has been up until today. But now we're starting to move into a world where the SERP is just so fragmented in terms of the attention and where Google is actually sending visibility. So what you got right now, if you think about Google, we have multiple parts which are much different. Okay, so we still have the paid. Okay, that's obviously Google want their part. So we have the paid right here at the top. So we got that. Then after now we have the AI overview. So here we have Google trying to sum up our content. So this is the AI overview. So this is the AI part. Then after we're going to have other search results. Okay, so we're going to have a mixture of parts. We're going to have sometimes traditional SEO. So your website just being featured. Okay, that's going to be one result. Then after we're going to have maybe Reddit. Okay, so Reddit's going to start ranking here, and that's going to be like communities and forums. So we've got Reddit. I'm just going to put Reddit here. So we got traditional, as you said, traditional SEO like this. And then after we've got Reddit, and then after we're going to have maybe more results of traditional SEO. And then after maybe we're going to have LinkedIn Pulse this time. Okay. So we're going to have LinkedIn Pulse, and maybe we're going to have Medium. We're going to have these other third-party websites which are actually ranking, and they're owning up basically more visibility. And the one we've actually forgot, which is going to make a bit of room for him, is actually going to be YouTube. Okay. So YouTube actually is especially a big player right now. So we're going to have YouTube. We're just going to add him in as well here because there just wasn't enough room. So we're going to add YouTube. And YouTube, there's going to be the video carousel. Okay, so Google is actually putting through videos from Google, and these ones are also getting visibility. So as you can see, the attention here on the SERP is actually being completely fragmented in terms of like, it's no longer the 10 blue links here, because before, like you had all this space here to go and get organically, which means just by doing traditional SEO, you had a much higher chance in terms of getting yourself featured at this level here. But now what you got is you got competition increase, not only on the SEO, because SEO is more established as a channel, which means more companies invest into it, which means the entry barrier is much higher. But secondly, the SEO spot, which is available, is much less basically, which means you have to go and focus. You have to go and get attention in other spots. Yes, sure. You could say, hey, here we have the AI overview, which is definitely true, but we know that actually the click results here aren't as high as we thought they would be, but we still got visibility here. Basically, in terms of like traditional SEO, we've got this level here, we've got this level here, we've got probably a few extra results. But we've got this idea of like, there's other parts of the SERP which are actually owning attention. So what we want to be thinking, first of all, on the SEO front is, how do I get more share of voice and more attention across a single keyword of interest around my ICP? This is the question. This is where we're trying to move away from an old traditional SEO approach to a search everywhere optimization approach, basically, where we're trying to double down on different places which Google is actually showing and giving attention to. So that means that, sure, you can have the PPC team, which is going to run visibility maybe on the paid side. On the traditional SEO side, we're going to run for the AI overview. We're going to run for the traditional SEO, the traditional SEO results. But then we're also going to have a think about YouTube in terms of, could we have a long format YouTube video for this topic, which Google is going to send visibility both from the Google SERP, and we're also going to get that from YouTube. It's going to go over directly to the video, directly inside YouTube, which is, you know, the world's biggest biggest search engine. So still big interest. How can we get ourselves featured inside the Reddit community? And how can we get another piece of content also ranking, for example, on LinkedIn posts? How can we get it ranking on Medium, which Google is also putting through? We're starting to basically go into an idea of like trying to own basically more of that attention across a single SERP, because if we're more present, well, that means we're inside our consumer's head when they're trying to make that decision. And we have a much higher chance actually being the end solution they actually choose in terms of like taking a buying decision. So this is how this first idea of here in terms of like SEO right now, in terms of this approach, this is dead. Like this is completely, it's got to be forgotten. It has to be a new approach in terms of saying to ourselves, okay, the SERP is completely different. I need to get our solution present in multiple spots. So this is this idea, first of all, here in terms of how we're approaching SEO. So the way you want to go about it, you want to say to yourself, okay, this keyword of interest, we know it's a big topic for our ICP. How can we get ourselves featured inside the Reddit thread? How can we get ourselves featured inside the AI overview, the traditional SEO? How can we repurpose that content for LinkedIn? How can we get on Medium? How can we do a long format YouTube video? And how can we cross-pollinate also these different content assets? So for example, the YouTube video, you can embed it inside the blog post. The blog post then has the higher on-page quality score, because Google can say to himself, hey, you've created 2 assets on exactly the same topic. You can increase the dwell time on your blog post, which is also a good positive signal. Then after on YouTube, you can also send people back towards your blog post for a longer form read. There's multiple ways here you can cross-pollinate, but there's this idea here of like traditional SEO, the way it's done, just simply doesn't work. And this is the new approach which you need to be taking basically into 25 going forwards. And this is only going to get amplified by a direction where Google are actually going in. So this here, new way of doing SEO 2.0 in 2025. If you're actually interested in search over optimization and you spotted this yourself at Google and SEO is no longer what it used to be, I've put together a guide which covers exactly how to approach search over optimization and how you should be thinking about your content marketing strategy going forwards in 2025 and beyond. So if you're interested, feel free to grab the resource. The link is in the comments, and it covers everything you need to know about search over optimization and how to optimize for this channel and how to think about your content marketing strategy as a whole. So it's actually bulletproof. So the next point we're going to talk about is going to be content quality, and not creating generic content which is just focused on algorithms, but actually focusing on content which is actually done for users and building value. So let's talk about all of this in detail. I'm just going to get rid of the board here. So the idea being is that if you're simply creating content which has one single purpose of actually simply ranking on a search engine, That, first of all, isn't going to satisfy what the search engine is looking for, or for example, YouTube, if you're creating video content, and especially it's not what's going to convert your users. So there has to be a very different shift here in terms of how we're actually creating content. So a few others that come to mind is that how we level up content. Sure, when you're creating SEO content, you want to focus on the structure. Google's looking for like the H2s, the word counts roughly in terms of like the content depth, the internal link and the clustering. This is traditional SEO as we know it today. Like that part hasn't changed. But the real part which really changed in terms of like the actual depth which we put into content is that depending on your vertical, the level and the entry barrier which Google is looking for in terms of quality has been significantly risen. Sure, in certain verticals, you can probably get away with more fluffy content, but in most verticals, it's just not going to cut it today. So a few ways you want to be having to think about in terms of leveling up your content strategy is first thing would be including data to actually basically back up certain ideas, including inside your content, because this is going to incentivize LMMs and sort of AI overviews to trust your content more because you're actually backing up the parts inside your content with facts, which basically means these LMMs have less chance, less probability of actually getting their answer wrong, which are then feeding to users. So that's one part. The next part, which is being thrown around quite a bit, is EAT. So this very simply means is like the maturity of your brand in terms of like how well are you actually known for a certain subject. So this ties into a lot of other parts which are actually outside of traditional SEO. So it could be how many mentions you have across the web in different sources and different marketing channels. But one thing as well is just like idea being is you want to attach real experts behind your content. So find someone on your brand who has credibility, which you can basically put behind the content and just show that human touch basically directly on the website when someone arrives on your blog, show that the content has actually been written by real people. Okay, so that's one of the first ideas here in terms of just trying to display a bit more credibility basically behind the content. The next idea is going to be quotes basically. So these same experts, which you can either take from your own vertical, or maybe you can go and source basically snippets of information, snippets of like little tidbits and pro tips they've given across time, across webinars, across your YouTube channel, across the LinkedIn. You want to basically go and source quotes, and these quotes, you're going to then include them inside your content. So this means that your content is going to do two things. First of all, it's going to be a centerpiece in terms of for other people who are reading this content. Is going to be a way for them to have a centralized resource of pulling experience and pro tips, you could say, from different sources which are trusted into one single content asset. And that makes it valuable for the audience that's actually reading it. But also Google can then track basically the fact that, okay, this content actually includes sources from other people who he knows through his knowledge graph, which are actually basically well trusted inside the vertical. So adding these quotes is going to be a way for you to level up your content. And you can do that by either pulling quotes from your own content, so your own thought leaders inside your own company, or you can also take that from other thought leaders which are inside your vertical, and you can basically go and cite them. Okay, so you can, for example, go on LinkedIn and find different thought leaders and then include their ideas into your content. So this is an extra way. The next parts I would say are going to be on, for example, the visual assets. So this could be on including specific, so this is like moving away from the whole stock imagery, which, you know, really has no value at all for users, and really trying to double down basically on visual assets, which are going to help the stickiness basically of someone on your content. So what I mean by that is that the visual asset, when someone's reading through the article, is going to really bring a lot of value to them in terms of helping them to solve better their problem. Okay, so if you are, for example, in a very technical vertical and you're trying to explain a very technical concept, maybe it's like data lake versus data warehouse, you could probably do like some type of visual or graphic element to explain those two concepts and detail out basically. So you take the ideas inside your content and you basically show that in a visual way, which means when someone's going to be reading your content, they have a higher chance of sticking around and saying, okay, great, this content is well designed, it's well structured in terms of me understanding the ideas in a simple way, which is inside the content. So this is visual assets, and it's something which Google is also going to track both on how people interact with your content and also how it reads your page basically and understands what exactly is inside. A next thing, which is more on like, you know, opening up a new channel. But for example, if you include a YouTube video on the same topic, which belongs to your company, Google will be able to go and say to themselves, but this company has gone above and beyond in terms of creating an extra piece of assets, which is on the same topic. And they've really gone above and beyond for their users. And also Google can track that basically as a higher on-page quality score of the actual page. And secondly, if people are actually watching the video on the content, it can actually also increase the dwell time, or at least increase the interactions on the page, which Google is actually tracking in terms of like user and click data, which can influence positively the ranking signals. Okay, so that'll be YouTube. And the extra ideas here, which we could also talk about, would be content design. Okay, so this is the idea of like, instead of just like, okay, slab of text, etc. What can we do for content design? How can we break up our page in a way where we can satisfy multiple users which are coming to us for answers? So ideas here in content design, there's quite a few of them, but the idea being is that we want to break up our text and make it structured in a way where people can scan through it very easily. Okay, so content design, we're going to talk about, for example, key takeaways. Okay, so key takeaways are adding a box on your website, which basically straight away gives the answer to people straight away at the top of the page, where users, as soon as they arrive onto your blog post, they get the value, they get what you're trying to say straight away, and that will be a positive signal for some people which are arriving on the website and want the answer quickly. Okay, so key takeaways is the first way you can do this. You can also do the same principle for your conclusion. Right at the bottom of the article, you can basically highlight the key takeaways and the next actions for the person. And you can highlight that basically through the conclusions box and just having like a visual way of putting that information in a standout fashion. The next thing you can do as well is include, for example, expert picks. This is trying to basically redirect people towards other articles inside your website. And that's going to be a positive ranking signal in terms of Google tracking that other people are going to read more content. So that means that Google will actually send them to a trusted resource, which they're actually staying around and spending more time. So that'd be expert picks, extra ways for you to break up your content as well. And the next way would be also like pro tips and different sections, which allow you basically to break up the content. This could be pro tips, examples. It could be interesting fact, whatever it is, basically is an idea which you want to basically surface inside your content, which means when people are reading through your article, they can scan the content, they can get ideas much quicker. And these are basically different ways which you basically contribute into this idea here, which is content design. Okay, so all of this stuff here really is going to allow you to move away from the traditional SEO approach where the content is relatively fluffy. It's when we talk about it internally with teams, it's like, yeah, we're designing this for SEO, like it's an SEO article. No, what you want to do is you want to move towards a world where your content really is a trusted piece of content, and you'd be very happy to show it to your customers and distribute it across socials because there's lots of great information basically included inside. So this is the goal where you want to move towards, because this is going to allow you to do the next one, which we're going to talk about just after, but it's going to be like repurposing this content, pulling ideas basically from this blog piece, which other people will be very happy to go and read on a long format version on your website, but you would also, your team would be very happy to take that content and then distribute it into other places. And this is just going to mean that you have more leverage when you're actually doing your marketing strategy, your content strategy, because you're able to repurpose the ideas included into other sources. So this is the new approach here in terms of how you're going to approach your SEO content specifically, in terms of designing it in a way where it really is going to allow you to have lots more possibilities in terms of repurposing and in terms of really attracting the correct audiences. And this is also going to heavily help, of course, the quality standards that Google is looking for on the SEO front as well. Okay, so all of this is super important and really needs to be a big focus in terms of like how you're going to approach your content strategy going forwards later on. So this last part is going to tie all the pieces together, and it's the idea of distribution. Okay, so we want to move towards an approach where we're creating once, and then after we're distributing, we're going to distribute it forever. Okay, that is what we want to approach and how we want to approach our content strategy, because this is what's going to allow us to actually outdo other marketing teams which have a lot more resources in terms of bandwidth, whether that be on budget or even time, because they can approach channels, they have the manpower. Us on our hand, we're probably much more limited. And what we're going to do basically is say to ourselves, okay, how can we create one upfront piece of content and after redistribute that piece of content into more formats, which then goes across more channels? Because channels must be approached in actually a more of an omni-channel approach instead of just operating in silos. And that's when you can get the biggest bang for your buck, basically, in terms of your efforts. So we want to say to ourselves is, okay, we've created an SEO blog articles. That's our long format, okay? Our long format has lots of content, lots of ideas, okay? We're starting with a long format piece, but we could actually have two long format pieces. We could have, for example, our SEO article. We could also have our YouTube video, which could also be long format. This could be on the same topic. We could have a written version and video version, the same with the ideas included in one or the other can be basically taken and then put into the other, depending on how you want to approach your workflow. But this SEO article can then be repurposed into a LinkedIn carousel, for example, which you can, repurpose into maybe 2 or 3 different formats, the way you twist it. But different sessions of that article could be done into a carousel. Then after, what you can do is you can also take different ideas and put them into so this was a carousel we said, but these ones over here could be LinkedIn individual posts. So this means your content, once again, is going even further. So LinkedIn posts, these can go onto like your founder, if you're doing like founder-led marketing, really just depends on like the content, how it's tailored. That's one way. How could we also make a snippet in terms of like a newsletter? We're also getting an idea here. What else can we do from that side? How can we, after on the YouTube video, how can we create some shorts on it? Okay. How can we create some shorts? How can we create also similar story? How can we create some LinkedIn posts? These shorts, we can put them across whatever channel makes the most sense for us. If it's YouTube, if it's LinkedIn, if it's TikTok, Instagram, depending on your vertical, if that makes sense. But still, the shorts element can basically be repurposed across multiple channels under a short form video format. So you can put that onto LinkedIn posts. You can also extract ideas and you can do that on LinkedIn. You could also do a newsletter, and as you can see, our content basically is going much further. So obviously you can push this out into bigger degrees in terms of how far you push out this full process. But the idea being basically is that you're going to get a lot more leverage if you're to say to yourself like, okay, our content strategy, we don't only just want to create an SEO blog article to get traffic and visibility from the SERP, Google, but we actually want to take that content, repurpose it, get more visibility across other platforms, but also especially drive back the visibility from these platforms back towards maybe a longer form piece of content, or maybe back for a YouTube video, because maybe one of the ideas inside one of these LinkedIn posts, or maybe like a YouTube short, spiked the interest of a user and after directed people back towards the long format content, because the long format content often has a tendency of converting users more, and all the shorts and all this shorter form content often has a tendency to have one single goal of driving the interest back towards a longer theme piece of content, which your audience is going to spend more time with you and they're going to have a higher chance basically of converting. So that is basically how I would approach it, this idea of distribution. And it's the last part basically, which can tie up your content strategy so that you have a bulletproof approach going forwards into 2025 as a SaaS company, because here you have all the parts basically tie up together. And this is everything you should be considering basically right now today. So that's a wrap. We've covered everything you should be thinking about when it comes to running a content marketing strategy as a SaaS company this year. So if you're interested in other marketing channels, which you should be thinking about, which are actually hot right now and actually worth your attention and your time, I've created a separate video which you can go and check out. It covers every single SaaS marketing channel, which I think is highly underrated, and you should really basically go and check it out. So feel free to check out that other video if you're interested in that topic.